Graduated from the 110th Police Academy with the Rockham County Sheriff's Office. And Bill came to the Northampton Police Department on July 7th, 1997, under then Acting Chief Michael Maloney. Bill also worked for the Newington Police Department as a part-time officer beginning on September 12th, 1997, and continued in that capacity for some time. Bill has been the go-to field training officer for many years. He has trained many officers throughout his distinguished career. His patience and demeanor in teaching new officers will be hard to match, but the fact that Bill taught so many, it is likely that newer field training officers will share some of Bill's traits. I was Bill's field training officer many years ago, and as we all know, it's hard to ride in a car with somebody, and I was riding as a passenger as his training officer, and Bill told me I used to make him nervous because I used to point out to other cars, coming, and I'm like, Bill, he says, I see him, don't worry. And so there was this one time where on Cedar Road, where he was backing out of a driveway, and I saw a car coming broadside towards me, and I kept my mouth shut, and I was starting to get a little nervous to the point where I couldn't even say anything. My hand just went up to the window, and all of a sudden Bill, at the last second, stopped, slammed with the brakes, and ooh, I didn't see that one. So we've had some fun. And in addition to a field training officer, Bill has been an instructor in firearms, baton, defensive tactics, and pepper spray. And an instructor plays an intricate role within a police department, ensuring that officers are up to date in training and meet annual police academy requirements. In addition, Bill was one of the 4 certified motorcycle officers the police department had during the time the department had a motorcycle. To this day, Bill loves to ride his own bike. On December 5th, 2016, I had the pleasure of appointing Bill to the position of detective. He has been doing an outstanding job in that position since taking it over. Although Bill loves the position, he has said for many years that he would put in his 20 years and retire. He held true to his word. As a matter of fact, Officer Peter Cormier had started with the Northampton Police Department on May 17th, 1997. The two of them had intended on retiring together before Pete's untimely death on October 3rd, 2015. With Bill's retirement, he will pursue new opportunities. I'm sure his wife, Deb, will appreciate the fact that he'll be home more now and not subject to ordered overtime shifts or call-outs. Thank you, Deb, for lending Bill to us for 20 years. Bill has had many friends over the course of his career, and the friendships do not end with his retirement. They will blossom. The Northampton Police Department and the town of Northampton will forever be part of Bill's family. We wish him success and good health in his retirement from the town.
Speech. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks everybody for showing up. It means a lot. After 20 years of doing this job, you meet a lot of people along the way. You get a lot of experiences that you get to experience. So to see all these people here today to show up for this event, it really touches my heart. It's pretty emotional right now for me. I didn't think it would be, but it is. Northampton will always have a special place for me. I love this community. I love the job. Had a little loyalty for Northampton because, yeah, it was my first place that I started as a full-timer. And I stayed here through my whole career just because I like this place a lot. Northampton's, like I said, has always been a special place for me. Having spent my whole career here, some of the individuals that I've had the pleasure of working with that have touched my life, such as Chief Mike Maloney and Officer Peter Cormier. Those types of things I will always cherish and always have in my heart as I move on to other things. But I would like to thank all the guys that I work with currently and in the past for all their help and their dedication and their support through my years as being a full-time police officer. Not only is it a pleasure to have been a Northampton police officer here, but it's also been a pleasure to work with a lot of good friends that work right next door to us that help us and support us along the way as well. The guys from the Northampton Fire, so I'd like to reach out to those guys because they mean a lot to us guys, to myself, a lot of good friends over there, and they're a very professional department, and I really, really appreciate them guys. I would be remiss if I didn't mention one particular person in general. This person. This person supported me through my whole career, through the start of it, and has been my absolute rock, my support system, my counselor when I needed one. And so I have to recognize this person for everything that she has done, and that's my wife, Deborah. So even though I'm ending my full-time career here in Northampton, I will remain part-time for a short period of time as I pursue my other endeavors that await me, my new challenges, what I'm looking forward to. I will miss the job. I love being a detective. I love being a full-time police officer, but it is time for me to move on, and I'm very much looking forward to the new challenges that brings. So with that said, I'd like to thank again everybody that has shown up, supported me. I'd like to thank the Select Board and the residents of the town of Northampton for the compassion and the support and everything that they have shown our department. So thank you very much.
It's a measure of the time that you have spent and now the time ahead of you. Nice. We recognize, I think some of us, not as frequently as we should, the danger that you face. This community has not been untouched by violence towards police officers. And so we say with a great deal of gratitude that we have delivered you to the other side safely, and the rest is your responsibility. Awesome. So this reads to William L. Adams III, 20 years of exceptional service to Northampton. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Are there any people here that would like to speak at this time regarding the selfish Detective Adams leaving us?
Yes, I would. I'm a citizen. I'm a Hampton citizen. My name is Maureen Sullivan. I'm a resident, and I'm also the executive director of the Child Advocacy Center of Rockingham County, which is an organization that's dedicated to professionals who pursue the truth in child abuse investigations. It takes unlimited emotional capacity to work in law enforcement today. And when a challenge arises and local police have no choice but to handle the situation. When Bill Adams was assigned to detective, I have to admit, I was skeptical. Here comes this guy who looks like Dwayne Johnson. You guys know Dwayne Johnson, The Rock? Who's assigned to handle the most reprehensible crime, which is those committed against children. I gotta tell you, Bill, you excelled. And I don't know who in this room is going to replace you, but someone has some really big shoes to fill. I've witnessed firsthand your kind of heroism, my friend, which was remarkably sober and very undramatic. You never had the need to surpass others at any cost, but rather an urge to serve others at whatever cost. Please don't lose that. Please pass that on. I am so thankful to have worked with a guy of your caliber, a family man, a volunteer, and a law enforcement officer. Perhaps the best way in order to convey my appreciation to you as a citizen and as a peer is to acknowledge you publicly. So thank you, my friend.
Anyone else? Now's the time to kick him while he's down. All right, thank you all for coming. I don't know what we can say to someone who dedicated 20 years of their life. especially in that job, other than thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Why don't we do a brief recess and let people,
Maybe we should.
yeah.
Jim, we're going to call it for 5, just to let everybody get out. Is that okay?
Sounds reasonable.
All right, 5 minutes off.
I saw Marcel yesterday.
Vicki Jones, can you hear me?
Vicky,
It's like 60 degrees in my hotel room, and I see you fanning yourself.
Yeah, we don't have the air conditioning installed yet, and the fans are doing nothing.
All right, are we ready?
We're good, we're on, right? Good.
Hold on.
I think we were on the whole time.
We were on the whole time.
We're good, okay. Paul, we need to mention the motions we made in non-public, correct?
Yes, sir. So the non-public session dealt with the role and the salary for the cable director. The board took 2 motions. The first was to adopt a salary range of between $48,000 and $52,000 per year for 32 hours of work per week for the cable director, subject to the role description that has been drafted. That roll call vote was 3-0, 3 in favor, none opposed. The second was to confirm John Savastano as the cable producer at $50,000 per year for 32 hours of work per week. That vote was also 3 votes in favor, no votes against.
Okay. Kathy, would you agree to consider bringing 10.2 to the forefront and then go to the public comment, because the GZA people they're on the clock. So.
I agree.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Did you hear that, Jim?
I did, and that's fine with me, too.
Okay.
Just need to reorganize.
Great. Let's invite our GZA people up, and I'd like to meet them.
Tanya, you have to go to the podium. You folks have to go to the podium. If you guys would introduce yourselves. What I thought we might do is have Tanya summarize her review of the Exeter environmental filing.
Right.
And then perhaps have a discussion with, more generally, about a plan going forward and how to address where we are with the gun club.
Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Again, my name is Tanya Justum. I'm with GZA. And I'd like to start by summarizing this memorandum to the town. Let's see.
Could you move the microphone a little closer to you? Thank you.
Better? Okay. Exeter Environmental submitted a site investigation to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services in early April. GZA reviewed that site investigation for the town, and this is some of our takeaways for the town. First of all, the site investigation summarized all of the activities that have happened over the last several years, since 2013, when they were first asked to provide a site investigation. Where we did not provide a comprehensive review of this, in general, the site investigation report did appear to conform with DES's requirements, with the exception that a topographic plan was not provided. Can you hear me well enough now? Would you like me to adjust?
We can.
You might have to speak up
Yeah.
just a little bit.
Okay.
We don't have a sound system, so you have to
Project out for the,
project out.
turn slightly so you can hear me better. Okay. In terms of the site investigation itself, some takeaways that, and I do want to emphasize this wasn't a comprehensive review, but these were the major takeaways from what our review of it was. Starting right off, there were some inconsistent dates for the development of the configuration of the site. That's not especially important. However, when there's confusion as to when different portions of the site were developed, it does reflect badly on how other portions of the report are going to be perceived. With the second bullet, there was a conclusion made by Exeter that the shallow groundwater at the pistol rifle range is a possible but not likely significant, and I'm quoting here, contributing source of dissolved lead to surface water. This was taken from information from the groundwater sampling, 2 rounds that provided no detections of lead, or at least 1 detection of lead, but then a follow-up one in that well that did not detect lead. The problem with this conclusion is that the wells were placed too deep for sorry, let me phrase this well enough so it can make some sense here. The top 2 feet of soil is understood to be the contaminated portion on the site. So where groundwater encounters that is within the top 2 feet of soil. However, the monitoring wells are placed about 7 to 10 feet down for their screen. So the water that's coming through those monitoring wells is not necessarily the groundwater that might be touching the contamination and making it to the surface water. So while this would be, if there is something there, it would be a shallow situation. It's not something that's going to be getting into wells, but it is possibly impacting the surface water, and as such, groundwater contamination shouldn't just be ignored at this point.
So you're saying that's a technical defect and that you're measuring water that you don't want to measure?
I wouldn't say that you're measuring water you don't want to measure, because it did provide information that there was not a deep plume of lead that had gone down, which is positive information. However, it does not provide all the information necessary to be able to discount groundwater as a discharge to surface water for contamination. There were a number of places in the site investigation where soil volumes were estimated for what contamination would need to be removed at some point. The volume of soil, there were 2 values given that the soil was compared to, the soil remediation standards and, the upper concentration limit. Now, the soil remediation standard is a more stringent standard than the upper concentration limit, and yet it is measured only to 0.5 feet, half a foot, whereas the UCL was taken down to 2 feet where it was discussed. that is really something that probably should be resolved as to why the more stringent standard showed less area. The wetland sediments were not compared to sediment screening criteria as requested by DES. To elaborate on that a little bit, the soil remediation standard, as I mentioned before, is a enforceable regulatory standard for soil contamination. It's for lead, it's 400 milligrams per kilogram. For sediment, however, there is screening criteria that has been established, not a regulatory standard, but a screening criteria to protect ecological life, or ecological health. So benthic life within wetland sediment or beneath a river or in a lake of some sort. These criteria, screening criteria, are much more stringent than the soil remediation standard, and based on the information provided in the site investigation report, a great portion of the site is wetland, and as such should be looked at based on the more stringent regulatory, not regulatory, but the screening values for ecological health.
Would you consider that pretty basic? I mean, having been there, I mean, you've seen the place, it's all wetlands, most of it.
I haven't been there myself, but based on just how it's shown on the figures, I believe Exeter themselves has outlined a goodly portion of the site as being wetlands. There is a discussion of spring liming of trap fields. This is consistent with best management practices for gun ranges. However, there's not really much discussion of follow-up on this, whether any soil samples were collected to check on whether pH values had increased. And it should be understood that liming would be something that would be done in the uplands. Lime is inappropriate to in place on a wetland or within standing water. So this would be a best management practice for the uplands, and perhaps the gun range is already doing the soil analysis to verify that the liming has done its job. However, that was not included to provide any information.
Isn't it true that distributing lime in a wetlands is not allowed? You can't do that. You can't just contaminate a wetlands with calcium oxide. Is it calcium oxide?
Yes.
I understand the point of raising the pH, but it's a wetlands, and that's
absolutely. I don't know that. I don't know that it's flat out not allowed, that there is any sort of written law that says you can't apply lime. However, there are very protective laws for wetlands and what you can and can't do in there. And certainly wetlands tend to have low pH. That is the ecology of a wetland. So raising the pH in a wetland could potentially damage the quality of the wetland. The down gradient water quality sample, SW7 on the Little River. So down gradients, I'm just referring to the farthest downstream sample that was collected on the Little River. This sample, the concentrations of lead that were detected exceeded the water quality criteria for toxic substances, fresh chronic criteria. So based on that, there is not currently a down gradient location on the Little River that is clean. That would be an important next step to find how far downriver the impacts are.
Sounds ominous to me. Off the reservation. How far?
It does.
How much?
It does raise concerns of just how far away you're seeing impacts in the Little River. And it could potentially be that it's just on the other side of SW7, but we don't know that until you have that down gradient boundary. It does beg the question of just how far this goes. And then the conclusions state in the Little River, concentrations of lead in the Little River are generally low, although levels at 2 stations exceed conservative chronic water quality criteria. That is actually backwards based on their own information provided in this report. It was that all of these locations exceeded the chronic water quality criteria except for 2, which were the background locations. Any questions on the findings on that before I?
Jim, do you have any questions?
I have 2 questions, and the first, thank you, Larry. The first might be directed to you, Larry. Even if liming was permitted in the wetlands, if you put lime down, does it have a cumulative effect over years, a beneficial effect over years, or does it wash away and you have to do it again and starting at 0? Does that question make sense?
Yes, I'm not sure I can answer that, but if you remember the time we visited there, even when it was in January, there was a lot of water flowing through that site. So I'm not sure how you apply a palliative chemical to flowing water and expect it to do any good. I mean, there's a lot of water flows through there.
You would expect in the wetlands, and especially in areas with flowing water, that no, that would probably be taken away fairly quickly. Even in an upland area, the best management practice is to apply lime every year and to test the soil for the pH at least once a year, if not every 6 months, because the expectation is that yes, the lime is going to dissolve over time and it's going to wash away and its effectiveness will decrease.
And also, I mean, it's probably not likely that you're going to change the pH of something. If you're talking about 2 feet of sediment, it's not going to really have much of an effect on much of that 2 feet. Right?
Correct. It is specifically meant for the upper portion, the very top portion of the sediment of soil.
It does kill the vegetation too, so.
Yes.
I don't think we want to be killing vegetation in wetlands. Kathy, do you have any questions?
Mm-mm.
Larry, I have another question, if I may.
Please.
On page 3, in the paragraph that begins, based on GCA's experience, in the middle of the paragraph it says, well, the sentence reads, based on GCA's experience with similar sites, we anticipate that NHDES will review the report and prepare a response letter potentially, and here's my question, requesting clarification and or correction on specific topics or data sets within the report. Would you expect that the correction on specific topics or data sets to match those which you have pointed out in your letter, or would you expect that that could be any correction whatsoever? I'm curious what they might be correcting.
Honestly, it could be any correction. The individual reviewing the site investigation report may see things that I did not see, or may miss some of the things that GZA's review saw. That's where having, one of our recommendations is sharing GZA's general comments with DES, that some of these things could also be noticed if they might have been missed, and that perhaps they don't need to look at those details, they could also look at some other things and catch something that we missed. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
On the second page of your letter where it says the wetland sediment were not compared to sediment screening criteria as requested by NHDES, will NHDES pick that up and make them address that? It was part of the original inquiry?
I believe so. There was some discussion with the SAP that a back and forth for the sampling and analysis plan that laid out the most recent sampling that was done by Exeter Environmental, where Exeter disputed the definition of sediment. And that is what they're basing what they are comparing sediment to. In DES's definition, sediment also includes sediment in wetlands as well as sediment that's in rivers and ponds. Based on my reading of the back and forth on the SAP, it was kind of left as an open that DES was not going to argue this anymore. However, they reserved the right to come back to it at some point.
I mean, isn't it true if we don't look at the sediments in the wetlands, then we're missing much of what we should be looking at? I mean, the site is, except for the small uplands area, it's all wet. So, I mean, that would be, by definition, evading the whole responsibility of what we should be looking at.
And they are looking at the wetlands. They're just describing the dirt in those wetlands as soil and comparing it to the soil standards as opposed to calling it sediment and looking at it compared to the screening criteria for sediment.
Is 2 feet of BBs sediment?
Sorry?
Is 2 feet thick of BBs, lead BBs, sediment, or is that, what is that? Because that's what, I mean, you can see piles of lead.
The lead shot itself wouldn't be referred to as sediment. It would be a contaminant.
Sediment would be underneath the BBs?
Yes.
Okay. I guess I'm disappointed. I'll speak for myself. I would have expected someone who was responsible for this to take it more seriously. And now I'm concerned about DES because they don't live here, but we do.
That was the first decision point that we'd like for you guys to consider tonight. Is we'd like permission to forward the GZA report to DES so that we have built the record of our objection to this SI, and that DES has the information that we have and that we think is important from a town's perspective as they begin to review this SI. So that's the first decision point, is we'd like permission to send this report to DES on behalf of the town.
Did you hear that, Jim?
Agreed.
Say again?
Agreed? Did you get me?
Yeah, did you hear that, what Jim just, what Paul just said?
I did hear what Paul said, and I agree with sending the letter to DES, or the report to DES.
Kathy?
I agree with it.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion to that effect?
Sure.
I'll move what we forward the GZ report to New Hampshire DES, and I don't know how we want to comment it, but for their comment, and I don't know, how do you effectively convey disappointment while asking for help from somebody who has no money?
What I would prefer is the motion just authorize me to send the report, and we can talk about the communication piece in the second half of the presentation. So if you're just happy with a motion to convey the report.
I'll make that motion. Did you hear that?
I did. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comment? Further discussion?
I have to take a roll call vote. So, Mr. Majori, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mrs. Kilgore?
Aye.
Okay, so the second part of what we had envisioned was to have a more general discussion about what to do next and how to ensure that the town's views get communicated to DES effectively, and how we can address the significant delays that we're encountering. So, Muriel, if you're ready.
My name is Muriel Robinette. I'm with GZA. I have been formerly employed by the Department of Environmental Services and know many of the players there. I've also represented towns on various issues with respect to DES oversight work and remediation and cleanup. And I've been part of reviewing this information and have some suggestions as to what you may want to consider. Obviously being respectful of the fact that the DES is the regulatory body and they regulate by media. And so they have to follow their various protocols as to the media that is impacted by a particular operation. And in this case, the operation is an active operation, and so they're just going to be addressing the media, not the operation itself, other than they've said don't add any more lead to the environment. And as the body that is ultimately responsible for what is released or active at this particular site, you do have a right to be heard. And whether or not you do that through active letter writing, there will be a time of formal input that you would be allowed to have, because when the remedial action plan is written, it's considered draft, and it goes to the agency in a draft format, and the agency then will hold a public hearing if requested within the host community. And at that time, you would request a public hearing if you were so interested, and then you would be able to submit your questions, concerns, input, or whatever that you have, whether it was through your Conservation Commission or Planning Board or Select Board, or however the mechanism that you chose to at that time. And the DES really listens to that. Another possible way that you may consider is the fact that it is documented that you have surface water impacts out here, which have left the property. And I think you have a Conservation Commission that's watching the Little River and potential inputs to the Little River and the quality of the water and the health of that area. And the Conservation Commission could have a voice in what is done or not done or considered, or how it's evaluated because of their ongoing work within the Little River.
Excuse me, are you suggesting that we could suggest to our Conservation Commission that they do testing in Little River for bacteria and such? Should we also ask them to be looking for lead?
Well, whether or not you ask them to go test for it or look for it, or have them tracking technically what's happening at this particular site with respect to water quality, and how does that impact their overall mission or project specific that you have, whether it's part of your master plan or not, or just part of a special initiative that you may have, they could play a role in that way to assist the town in having a technical voice. Because what I've heard is that you're interested in helping DES appreciate the fact that you live here and that you want this project moved forward, and not have long delays or have a sense of concern as to the media that are involved.
Do. And my, I'm sorry, I just noticed the Pecks are here. Hi, y'all. What's your suggestion? I mean, I'll give this to you.
Suggestion for, I'm sorry.
What should we do? To get, you know the DES, what's the best way to get their attention?
Well, number one, you just took a vote, and you're choosing to have a technical voice through GZA as to some very, very specific comments about the work. You may want to put a cover letter over that memo and state whatever sense of urgency or town initiatives that you have that contribute to why you're so interested in how this project is addressed, whether it's from a time frame, a technical basis, remedy, or otherwise. Whether or not the town has any property issues specific, or if it's just the wetlands issues. Second of all, you may ask your Conservation Commission to write their own letter. They certainly could do that from a explanatory basis as to what they're doing and what their interests are within the impacted water body, and how they would like to make sure that the DES consider this resource that the town is spending money on.
Okay. Did you hear that, Jim?
Most of it, yes.
Okay. He heard most of it. Kathy, you have any comments? Paul, do you think you could come up with some verbiage for the cover letter?
Yes. So I have some suggestions. The first is, I think you should vote to authorize GZA to comment on whatever remedial action plan may be submitted. And I also think that you should authorize GZA to request a public hearing on behalf of the town when the remedial action plan is filed. They're going to be watching, we're going to be watching. I think you should go ahead and load that bullet into the gun so that we don't have to wait when the RAP gets filed, that they'll start work commenting on it and they'll request a hearing on our behalf.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, I can draft a cover letter and circulate it. Number three, I think you should request the Conservation Commission to ask FB Environmental how much extra it would be to test for lead in the Little River. We're already testing in the Little River.
Yep.
So what would it be to add a testing regime, and for them to pursue that and then to report back to us on what the cost is, and so that you guys can balance the cost versus the benefit of doing that. I also think you should ask the Conservation Commission to write a letter to DES asking for timely review of the SI and the RAP, and to be more timely given the resources that are involved. And finally, I think you should appoint one of your members to be in the fore of this project, very much like you are in the fore for Coakley Landfill Group, so that, for example, review of the cover letter can be streamlined and a decision made without having to wait 2 weeks for a meeting, and also for you to represent the board in front of DES and or whomever, so that you can indicate on behalf of the town what the position is on a timely basis and on a continuing basis. That's in addition to the communication plan that we've already developed with GCA, which is watching the DES website for filings and then responding quickly when we do get a filing. So those are my suggestions.
Did you hear any of that, Jim?
I heard all of it.
Okay,
I
excellent.
just don't know exactly, Paul, how you want to go ahead with that. Is that a we need a volunteer to be the point person for this, if we agree to that. And then, do you want motions for everything else, or is there consensus, or what do you think is best?
With respect to the authorizing GZA to comment on the RAP and to request a public hearing, I think you should do a motion for that, because that would involve expense. But everything else, you know, I think I can prepare that on a consensus basis unless someone has an objection to what's been proposed. And I don't think this is an exhaustive list. If somebody else has a suggestion, I'm all in. I just thought I'd get the discussion started.
Yeah. Kathy?
Sounds like a plan.
I think, yeah, gets us going. All right, so, Jim, after all that, so it was 4 items. First one requires a motion. The other 2 we would leave to Paul. You agreed to that?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion would be to empower GZA to, I forget.
To comment on the RAP and to request a public hearing on our behalf at the right time.
Right. I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Did you hear that, Jim?
I did.
Okay.
Mr. Majori.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mrs. Kilgore.
Aye.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and prepare requests to the Conservation Commission. We'll get the cover letter done. Who wants to volunteer to bird dog this project? Which of the three of you would like to be lead and water conscious?
Here we go. You're talking about the select board.
Yeah.
I'll volunteer if the others agree, or Kathy?
I'm not throwing my hat in just because I'm coming in quite a bit late.
Yeah.
And I don't want to miss anything.
Why don't we do this? If Jim, if you're in agreement, why don't I start out and then we'll see where it goes?
I think that's great. I was going to volunteer, Larry, especially since I'm the representative to the Water Commission and could have their input also. But you have the technical experience with your background in chemistry that might be invaluable to the process. I just don't want to burden you beyond what is reasonable. So if you feel that you can handle it, then fine, and I think you're a great person to do it. But if you feel that it is a burden, I'd be happy to help.
All right, I'll be the Coakley person and you be the lead guy.
Okay.
Be careful, Henry Fuller's here.
Yeah, I see him all in the background. I saw Mr. Harned with his hand up, but then he put it down when I started talking.
I know, I don't know what that means.
Well, given the hour and
Yep.
the hourly wage and the heat, let's not ask him. If there's, do you guys have any other questions for GZA? I'd like to get them on their way
I'd like to, first of all, thank Muriel for participating and being part of this. You're an expert in this field. And Tanya, thank you for doing what you're doing. We do live here, and lead's not a nice thing. And there's a lot out there. We just have to figure out a way to live with it. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you for coming. Just thinking that we might want to, is Henry Marsh still here? We have jumped over our first public comment session, and I'd like to maybe go into that now and let Henry Marsh come in. What do you think, Jim? Can you hear me?
Hey, Jim,
I'm sorry, yes, I heard you.
Okay. Is that okay with you, Kathy?
Yeah.
All right. I'll invite, so I'll open our first period of public comment, and someone who is not to be denied is Henry Marsh, one of our state reps.
He's still here.
I'm limited to 3 minutes according to your...
We'll make an exception for someone who's...
Let's go 3 minutes.
All right.
I don't get one, Henry?
I don't have that technology at this time. Pretty much what I just gave you, obviously the session is closed now in the legislature, but I thought I'd give you an update on what has transpired. And each of you should be receiving the legislative bulletin. If not, I will put you on the list. And I think you do get that. Is that correct? Okay. And that keeps you current as to what's happening in the legislature that has to do with the municipality of Northampton. Just a few items. The budget did pass. They have, they're looking at right now just about $100 million in a rainy day fund that's been put aside. They've lowered the business profits tax just a little, about 0.5%. And the reason I wanted to come to you tonight is to let you know that, one, that the so-called kindergarten bill has passed, and each community will receive $1,100 per kindergarten student that's on a full-time basis. And Northampton, we have quite a few. So that money comes back. To say it goes to the district, the school district, or to the town, I can't tell you today, because that won't start. But we're going to be receiving $1,100. Even though we were a donor town, in the new bill that just passed, we should receive that $1,100. There's also, in this budget, I'll give you just a couple numbers. The room and meals tax for year 2018, $68 million will be coming back. Highway and block grants is going to be $35 million. Additional highway grants, at Senate Bill 38, there's $30 million. And then there's a bridge aid of $6 million. Environmental, that just talking about, for 18 is 7.3 million, in 19 is 5.3 million. Environmental grants, additional, there's another $1.7 million coming in. So this budget that's proposed is to help communities, as you'll see, in the 3 pages that I gave you. The governor has been awarded, I think it's $38 million for scholarships to students in the New Hampshire schools. The state university system is level funded. So basically what this budget is, that, this concept of no new taxes, that's what this budget looks at. So in business as well, I mentioned the business profit tax is down. Also, as you know, the electric rates in New Hampshire are skyrocketing. So for that energy, they've lowered that by 5%. Not a lot, but it's 5%. But I just wanted to get to you and get 3 minutes of just an overview that things that are happening in Concord that are going to affect the community. There's lots of money, hopefully, as the distribution formula comes up, to the town of Northampton in roads and highways, also bridges. And if I can help you up in Concord on anything on the issue that was just mentioned, I am working on the other situation in Rye on water quality. I'm involved in that process with a couple legislators, and I think there's 2 senators working on that too. So whatever I can do to facilitate, be happy to do that.
Do you, last time you were here, I asked you a question about the rails to trails.
That I have not seen anything.
Nothing's
I
happening.
put out inquiries, and it's sort of like it's in limbo at this point. I don't know, Paul, have you heard anything?
No, sir.
I think it's just held. Have not heard anything. At Concord, I did check, and basically said there's nothing on any agenda. There's no bill that's come forward. I'm in the executive departments and administration part, and nothing there as well.
Jim, you got a question for Henry?
No, I thank Henry for coming in and sharing these issues with us. That's what we're looking for from, we need that cooperation to know not only what's happening in Concord, but how it affects Northampton so that we can work cooperatively to do the best that we can for the town. So thank you for coming in.
Okay.
Kathy?
Nope, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Henry.
Okay.
Paul, can you make sure this gets part of the minutes?
I also thought I'd post it on the select board page.
Okay, yeah, would be great. Thank you.
I have a quick question for Henry, if I may. Sorry, I didn't want you to go too far.
If I was in the legislature, I could say no.
The
No follow-ups.
increased revenue for the kindergarten,
Yes,
that's coming in, is that going to the school to offset the
that's what
school
I
budget?
just said. I don't know at this point because it's earmarked for the town.
Yeah,
Okay, that's where it's earmarked at this point.
okay.
Whether we're going to, the town's going to get it, it's part of an abatement of taxes anyway, so it's not,
Right,
you're not going to see it.
right.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could we ask Representative Marsh to maybe write a letter on our behalf to the DES Commissioner about review times on the gun club? Because the review time for the SI report that was just commented on is about 12 months.
Yep.
The review time for the RAP is 18 months. Clearly, they're overworked and underpaid, but I think we should remind DES how important it is for water quality, especially along the seacoast. And the only way to do that is to get our elected officials to help us with that. So, I mean, I'm happy to
I'll
provide
come
you.
in and see you sometime
Yeah.
next week or so, and we'll draft something, and we'll send that in for you.
That'd be great, Henry.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Anyone else would make a public comment? Hearing none? No takers, Jim.
I heard.
Shall we go back to 5.1? Well, the consent calendar, 5.1.2, .3. Do I hear a motion for the consent calendar?
I make a motion that we accept the consent calendar as stated on the agenda for tonight's meeting, Monday, July 10th.
You hear that, Jim?
I did, and I second it.
Okay, great. So we have a motion, a second. Any further comment?
I do have one comment in there that I'd just like to make sure that people know. There is a payment to Northampton Dental, and that payment is a reimbursement of landscaping surety that the planning board requires for 2 seasons of growing. They have met that. They have met their obligations, so that's a reimbursement to them. And I just want the public to see that. We don't have $8,000 worth of dental work that the town has suddenly found itself in need of.
Cool. All right, let's call the question.
Mr. Majori,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mrs. Kilgore.
Aye.
Excellent. Item 6, we have no correspondence, which I guess is a good thing. Committee updates. I'm on the Budget Committee, and nothing's happened, and we will have a meeting in the end of this month. Economic Development Committee.
We haven't met, and are we discussing that later
Yeah, I
on?
think we could defer that to
Okay.
item 9.1.
Jim, Heritage Commission.
On July 14th, which is this Friday, there will be a special meeting of the Heritage Commission and the New Hampshire Department of Transportation will be there to discuss the bridge project. That's the bridge over Route 1 up by Hubbington's Furniture. So that is a Heritage Commission meeting at a special date. Again, July 14th, which is Friday, and I didn't write down the time. But it's on the calendar.
10:30.
10:30.
10:30.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be there.
Quorum notice.
Conservation Commission, did you want to address that?
I don't have anything to report.
Do we know when we expect to hear more from Concord?
No. About.
Aren't we waiting for some back and forth in regards to conservation?
FB made the broader proposal for testing.
No, this goes back to the warrant articles from March. You know, how we had
yeah.
had sent it up to Concord and asked for a
Well, we
statement.
we sent it to Rockingham Superior Court.
Yeah.
And that case is ongoing, and I don't have anything new to report. I understand that there was an answer filed by one of the respondents, and I think we're just waiting for the court to set it up, but that's all I know at the moment.
Jim, Water Commission.
Commission is still very active in the ongoing investigation or litigation about Wiggins Way, and that's about all I have for them.
Yeah.
Capital Improvement Committee meets on Friday morning at 8 o'clock. We've been given we all received our packages last week to prepare for Friday's meeting, which I believe the fire department will be addressing the CIP.
Yes. I should say as a note to CIP members that the draft minutes are posted, and rather than waste the paper, if you could go on the website and read the draft online, that would be helpful.
Bandstand Committee.
Bandstand update. The Friends of Northampton Bandstand would like to thank the United States Air Force Heritage Band for a wonderful show this past Saturday, July 1st. We also would like to thank the folks that showed up despite the threat of storms. Fortunately, the rain held off. We had a lot of help from the Air Force Heritage Band saying, "We're on, this is going to happen." The Friends would also like to thank John Hubbard and his team for their work on the Common on Friday to make the grounds look beautiful for this show on Saturday. And also a special thanks goes out to John Savastano and his team for recording the performance, which is available to watch on YouTube and will be on Channel 22. And Joe Cutt and the American Legion for feeding the band, and to Dolores for putting all the pieces together to make the event go off seamlessly.
Nice.
Coming up this week, which is Wednesday, we have the Reminiscence playing, and then next Wednesday we'll have the Baja Brothers.
Wow.
Baja Brothers are fun.
Oh, I bet.
It's the Jimmy Buffett.
Is John going to be doing any recording?
Yes, I believe he will be.
That's great. Did you hear that, Jim?
I did. Thank you.
Report of the town administrator. That would be Paul Apple.
I thank you. If it please the board, I'd like to defer to the police chief, who would like to address the board.
Chief?
You're up.
Dear Mr. Apple and the Honorable Select Board, it is bittersweet that I inform you that I am retiring from my position with the Northampton Police Department, my last day being on August 31st, 2017. I have been a police officer since December 1990 and have been a member of the Northampton Police Department since December 1995. It has been a pleasure to work for the town of Northampton, and with over 26 and a half years in law enforcement in Farmington, Rye, and Northampton, I am ready for new opportunities and having more time with my family. I've been to several retirement parties in the past 2 years, and the common statement is that being a police officer, you miss many family events and children's events. Being the father of a toddler, these statements resonate with me. Earlier this year, my wife, Kristen, wrote a story for our blog titled, "When Dad is a Police Officer, Walking the Thin Blue Line," that puts it in perspective. My wife has been patient and understanding through the years, and the time for a new chapter is opening. It has been an honor to serving the town as your chief, and an honor having worked with so many dedicated professionals within the Northampton Police Department. I have enjoyed working with the Select Board and various committees, as well as the closeness experienced by all town employees working together. It'll be a life change for me, and I will miss working for the police department. I will miss Paul and department head staff meetings saying, "Make this a priority," to all of us. But most of all, I will miss the town having played a huge part of my life and the many friendships formed. Thank you.
Wow. Jim, would you like to comment?
Chief, I've had the pleasure of meeting your wife and your son. first want to say that I wish you all the best in enjoying your family during this transition, whatever the future may hold. When you're with them, each time I've seen you with them, the smile on your face just expresses how proud you are to be a father. And I hope you continue to share that pride and to express that pride in them. And I wish you all the best with them. And I thank you for your years of dedication to the town of Northampton, protecting us. And as I've said so many times before, I guess it's a backhanded compliment to say that most of the time we don't know what you do. And that is a backhanded compliment, because I know how hard you work, and I know how hard the department works to make sure that we never know the dangers that sometimes are right in front of us. And we never know exactly what it takes for you and your department to protect us. But what we do know is that when we put our heads on the pillow each night, we do so with knowing that we're safe and secure in our homes and as we enjoy the town of Northampton. So again, I wish you all the best in your retirement, and I'll use that with quotes because I don't know if that's exactly what you're going to do. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all you've done for the town of Northampton.
Kathy.
Mike, thank you. I've known you mostly by resident, and I've really appreciated what you've brought to the town and to the police department. And I wish you happiness and success wherever you go. I do wish you weren't leaving.
Thank you.
I'll go last. Chief, you know, I don't want to see you go, but I can also understand when you mentioned the thin blue line. After a while, in this case it's a long while, that badge must get pretty heavy. And when you have, in your case, a young child, it must be, it's hard. But all I can say is thank you for what you've done, and I wish you the best of luck in what you're going to do. And I would mention again, what Jim had mentioned was the citizens of this town have the ability to go to sleep at night with some fair confidence that everything's going to be under control. Don't need to know what's going on, but we just know that there is somebody on the job. So I'm going to miss you, but I'm sure that in your future some really good things coming, and a lot of family time too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If the board would permit me, I will engage in no sappy goodbyes. You still have a month and a half. You've got CIP stuff due on the 21st. Make it a priority. Make it a priority. Before you leave, we'll have a presentation. I'll save my sap for then. Thank you for your
I
hard work.
have many goals I need to achieve before the August 31st, but it'll be nice. As I've told a lot of people times, my wife used to refer to me as snuffleupagus, for those, because, especially early on in our relationship, because I was kind of invisible. I'd go into parties, and she'd go to parties by herself, and I didn't really exist. I was snuffleupagus, so thank you.
I would suggest, I don't in any way mean to be disrespectful, but I would suggest that at the next meeting, we add an agenda item to talk about what's next. If there's consensus on that, I will take care of that for July 24th.
I think that's a really good idea.
What's next for what?
In the police department.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we have.
Agreed.
Yep. Uh-oh, low battery. Okay.
Okay.
The fifth time you punched me.
Ah.
There is one vacancy in the fire department, and as you know, the chief has begun a process on the same conditions that we had the last time, that candidates either be in paramedic school or be already be scheduled to enter the paramedic program. I will be away on vacation for the next 10 days, so your faithful deputy town administrator will be in charge. Any issues, his number is 964-8087. I did want to inform the town that you will notice Georgia Doherty, who used to work at the town clerk's office, she's going to be working for us part-time on a temporary basis in the office to let Jan get caught up. That's just for the summer. There are no plans to expand the staff in any way. It's just allowing Jan to get caught up on some of the work that she has to do. I have made a request to get air conditioning, obviously not soon enough, but as soon as we hear more on implementation, I'll report back.
That was a fantastic idea, by the way.
Yeah, it was a great idea. Whoever came up with that idea, awesome.
Uh-oh. Jim, you're
Jim,
gone.
are you there?
Jim, are you there?
Yeah, Nation call.
Oh, okay, all right.
I could still hear you.
Also, the repair project that was authorized by the voters in March for the library for new lighting fixtures, removing and replacing the insulation and replacing the ceiling tiles. As you know, that bid process was developed through CIP. I have heard back from all the library trustees. There is general agreement for a joint meeting on the 24th to discuss implementation, and with your permission, I'll invite John Ritchie to be present as well so that we can start talking about what needs to be done in that project. The septic system for the library and the Stone Building is complete. As soon as we have a total bill, I'll report back. We continue to have problems with telephone lines here on campus, and I will be filing a complaint with PUC to replace the whole supply wire. I presume that I have your authority to do that. Any
Yes.
objection?
No objection.
Our last
Jim?
That I have no objection.
Yep.
Our last training session is tomorrow. Coakley Landfill Group will be here on August the 5th. The Select Board's next meeting is July 24th, which is a Monday. Ms. Swank is before you this evening to talk about funding for the community newsletter. There's two issues there. The first is funding for fiscal 18, which is we already established as our goal, and we're going to find that money in fiscal 18 to do that. The request is for funding in fiscal 19, which is $12,000. I think what you simply need to do is instruct me to build that into the budget when we start building the fiscal 19 budget. I think that's consistent with our goals. I would recommend it to you, and I think it's just something that needs to go on the list for inclusion in the budget.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
It's a community newsletter. We used to split the cost with the school, but then they pulled out of it because they didn't want to spend the money. It's still going to be a community newsletter, right?
Right.
So we're not going to exclude anyone. We'll just pay for it.
Correct.
Did you hear that, Jim?
I did hear that.
Okay.
CIP meets on Friday. I think we already covered that. There's a joint meeting of the Budget Committee on July 31st to develop joint strategies and expectations in developing the fiscal 19 budget. Field work on the Philbrook Pond is ongoing. A meeting with residents to report results will be in the autumn. We talked about GZA. We are going to apply for a grant with Rockingham Planning Commission to help us implement the stormwater regulations. It's a 50-50 match, so we pay for half, they pay for half. This will result probably in about $4,000 or $5,000 savings in terms of what needs to be done. Hazard mitigation continues to be underway and will be reported to you probably next month. We are running Windows 10 on a finance department machine to see if how compatibility issues work with our existing software. 7 and 8 are still supported, but our purpose in doing this, as we set out in our goals, is to avoid having to scramble because a certain system isn't supported anymore, so we're doing that work ahead of time. Additionally, high-use computers are beginning to be replaced, beginning in the town clerk's office, and probably toward the end of the year in the administration department. That's consistent with our replacement schedule and also goals that we set out for the year. That's all I have in my report. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Where are we on regionalization? Is just stalled and it's not going to go forward?
As I understand it, there's supposed to be an additional meeting, and they're waiting to get some information, and as soon as they get that information, there will be an additional meeting, but frankly, with the spring and summer vacation schedule, I suspect that we've ground rather to a halt until we get through the summer.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, you got any questions for Paul?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Apple.
Moving on, 9.1, discussion of Economic Development Committee charge revisions.
So I circulated the charge to existing committee members. I think Kathy rightly points out that I did it at the beginning of last week, but the beginning of last week was Wednesday. So they haven't had it for as long as they probably need to. I have heard back from 3 people with no suggested changes. So my suggestion to you is let's hold it open for a little while longer, and in the meantime, with Mrs. Kilgore's permission, she and I will begin to work on revisions to the charge with an idea of proposing revisions to the charge to you during the first meeting in August. We also had a request to be appointed by Mr. Stanton, and I would propose that we take up that request also at that time.
The first week of August?
First meeting in August.
Did Mr. Stanton provide was it a verbal interest? Did he provide any statement on?
He provided me with an email, so I can circulate that to you guys.
Please do.
Okay.
Was there anyone else? Was it advertised, other than beyond the?
It was advertised, and I think we went dormant, but would it hurt to keep it advertised at this point?
No, I don't. I think it would be good to continue the advertisement, and between now and that first week in August, and I will circulate the email. But he did provide me with a letter of interest.
I mean, I think the longer this goes on, we got to do it.
Right.
We got to get somebody on there. So I'll not agree to allow this to go past the first week in August. So just so everybody knows. You hear that, Jim?
I did hear that. The first meeting in August is the 7th or the 14th, Paul?
14th, unless you want it to be on the 7th.
No. So I would move then, since you have 2 pieces there, I would move to leave discussion of economic development charge revisions on the table until the first meeting in August, and add to it consideration of volunteers to that committee.
Can we meet on the 7th? Is that a Monday?
It is a Monday.
I'm just wondering, would you like to meet a week earlier? This keeps getting kicked down the street, and I want to get it over with. You want to meet on Monday, August 7th?
So we could meet on the 7th and the 21st as opposed to the 14th and the 28th.
Yeah.
Up to you guys.
I will not be here on the 7th. Unfortunately, I am responsible for coaching in Cooperstown.
Cooperstown?
I could do this again, though.
I'm not available the 7th either.
7th's not available. All right, go back to the 14th. Unless you want to let Paul and I run the town for 2 weeks. That'd be really cool.
So moved.
Wow.
Will we know more about the city planner
Yes,
by then, too?
I hope so. Yes.
I mean, it'd be nice to know if he's
Yeah,
going
what's
to be
going on.
available or if he's not going to be available, because if he's not going to be available, we should be looking at something else.
I'm not aware of what you're talking about.
For the Economic Development Committee, we had, the Economic Development Committee, although they didn't have a quorum, they met with this guy, and I think the consensus was that they should propose to you guys that we hire this guy to be an advisor, but he wasn't going to be available until he retired on June the 30th. Well, today's July 10th, so presumably he's retired, enjoyed some period of time off, and is going to be looking to move forward. So I've had email communication with Gary Stevens, and I think Gary's going to reach out to him. That was my impression of the email, but I will reach out to Gary again and figure out which one of us is doing it.
Okay. Uh, 9.2, we just talked about.
Can we go back to that? Hey, Jim, I think this is more a question for you.
Yep.
For that meeting on August 14th, will we have any results back in regards to maybe the pieces that are related from the survey?
It's a good question. Thank you for asking. I actually have my portion of the survey questions with me here in Pennsylvania, which I'm finishing up. And as soon as I get back, my plan is to speak with Mr. Derby and Ms. Rowden about about having all that data collated so that we can get it out to everybody. So I will have an answer for you. I can send the information, or I can send my update to Paul as soon as I get back on Friday, if that's okay.
That works.
Moving on, Capital Improvement Committee, we just did that, right?
Yeah, I would just update the board by saying that I think the consensus is that 674:5 authorizes the governing body to appoint members of the CIP if it was authorized by the legislative body in the enabling legislation. We have to find that original warrant article, which I did not have time to do today, but it has been our practice in the past when we added someone to the CIP to go to the voters. Right. The statute appears to give you authority to appoint, so a decision point for you on this issue is, if in fact you were authorized by statute, do you want to appoint, or do you want to continue your practice of going to the town? If you want to get this off the items left on the table, that would be your decision point. Go to the town or act if you're enabled.
I'll go first. If the statute says we can do it, then I would say do it, because otherwise we'll have to wait every year for this to happen. So I would be in favor of, if empowered by statute, to do so.
Okay.
I'm confused. Are we talking about adding an appointment, another position, or are we talking about filling an open position?
I think a new position. Is that correct?
Say it again.
Kathy,
What are we talking about? Are we talking about
Like
filling a position, an open position, or adding a position?
adding a position. Adding a position.
I'd like to see the statute before I make a
right,
decision.
if empowered by statute only.
Oh, I'm not saying I'm in agreement
Oh, I understand
with
that.
that.
I understand.
Okay, I just want it clear
Well,
that I'm not saying,
my comment was, I would only be in favor of it if it was such empowering legislation. You may not, but I mean, to
I'm
me,
looking up Paul's notes right now.
Thank you.
and how many times have we added over the years, do we know?
Once,
And how did we do that?
by going to the voters.
Warrant article.
So, in the past, we've gone to the voters, and now we're considering not going to the voters?
That's the decision point for you folks.
yeah, I would do that because if it's allowed by statute, simply because of all the wasted time and doing nothing, waiting for one day a year.
Well, the business is still getting moved forward with the committee that's sitting.
Not if you really believe that the committee deserves another member.
One member
But we
or
may-
two?
But we may not agree. We may not agree on that, but I'm just letting you know what I think.
And are we talking about one, or are we talking about two, or are we talking about multiple?
I think
We set up a precedence.
I don't think that question had been resolved. There was some discussion about maybe adding somebody from down the beach, and beyond that, I don't think you guys have made a decision. Maybe you don't decide tonight. Maybe you leave it on the table. You guys can read the statute, 674:5. I can find the enabling, and then we can talk about it again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's in as much as Jim is not here.
Right.
Yeah.
May I jump in, Larry, for a second?
Please do.
In 2010, we went to the warrant to create or to seat the people on the CIP, which created the number of people on there. In 2015, we went to warrant to add a library trustee to the committee. So we have precedent about going to warrant article to change the CIP. I understand in reading the enabling legislation that it seems to me we can have the discussion about the latitude that the select board has to appoint or to expand the committee, but it seems to me have created some precedent about how we seat the members, about how we create the committee. So I'm fine if you want to leave this on the table for discussion, but my homework seems to show me that we've established some precedent for how we do this.
I would only say, Jim, in looking back, if you do everything the same way forever, even though legislation may have changed, which we don't know yet, then why would you care about changing things but you don't want to change?
It's a good question. I mean, I personally, I stated this at whether it was the last meeting or the meeting before this. I agree with both you and Kathy that the more people that we have volunteering for positions in town, the better. But that doesn't mean, and I hope I was clear about that, that I think that if somebody volunteers for a board or committee, that we should just unilaterally or immediately expand the number of members on that committee. I mean, we might have a committee of 15, and then it be ineffective, where a committee of 7 might be much more effective. So I'm game for the conversation, but I think when we voted, I voted against the expansion for that idea. I just don't think that you just say, if you put your name in the hat, that you're already on the committee.
Yeah, we're not talking about filling it. We're talking about useful.
Expanding.
Right.
Right.
So you want to leave it on the table?
Yes?
I'm fine with leaving it on the table if it is for the purpose of doing our homework so that we can make an informed decision. I think that's what I'm hearing, so I'm fine with that.
Kathy?
Yep, same
Good.
way.
Good. 9.3. Oh, I got 5 minutes left. It's going to be a very quick meeting, 5 minutes. I turned into a pumpkin at 20 minutes of 9. Approval of meeting minutes of June 12th. Jim, that's the meeting that the minutes turned out to be 84 pages long.
78.
Yeah.
Okay, 78.
Did we change them? I mean, did she make corrections?
She did.
Okay. Was that those little notes that, like?
I think the notes that you got are for June the 26th.
Right. But I don't know if I saw the corrections for the 12th.
They're in
In our packet, this week was the 26th.
We've only had
Was
one
that
set of
just those
minutes.
notes? She had made a notes and she changed this and,
Why don't you defer until you get to minutes for the 26th? You can consider them together.
Okay, going forward, we've already taken care of 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, discussion of FY18 goals. How did that get on the, who asked for that?
I did.
Okay.
Are we really leaving in 4 minutes?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I'm glad you thought about it. That's good. What did-
Well, you said you expired, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'll weather on.
I put it on there because now we're into the new year. I think, and maybe this needs to be tabled to do a little bit more homework, but I was having discussions with Paul, talking about who's the lead on each one of these goals. And so who's the lead on the town management side, and who's the select board representative helping him? You know, so that there's a team working on project management of it, and getting an idea when, timeframes for these.
Are you referring to our work session? We came up with all
Yeah.
the board covered, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, last year, we just concluded that we collectively finished all the goals for last year.
Right. I mean, does it solely just rely on Paul to do everything?
Here's how it worked. Here's how it worked last year.
Yes, so moved.
Yeah.
You're late, Majori, pay attention.
The select board, you participated in the select board vision. And so last year, we did the same thing in the year before. And we decided, okay, these are the things we want done. And we have an administrator. And if he needs our help, he comes and gets us. But the timeline of accomplishing all those things isn't linear. So you can't really.
Well, I'm not holding him to a timeline. Okay. I guess I was looking for some more transparency.
I don't think there's any lack of transparency.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I'm just saying that in the case of trying to get something done, unless we, I don't know how you would allow somebody to do their job, and that's what we have to do.
Okay.
I would say there are a couple political goals on the list that you guys need to decide who's going to do what. For example, the question of the Winnicott River, because the culvert's been replaced on Walnut Ave, that's great, but there's still some backflow issues along Exeter Road and also at Lumbering Road. And the thought was that one of you or all of you would begin to work with our elected officials to get them to pay attention to this problem so that the water doesn't back over Exeter Road, which is a state highway. Rather than file a dredge and fill permit, which is an issue that we considered, pardon me, the thought was that perhaps a political solution would be in play. Now that's a goal that's hard to measure from an administrative perspective because it requires one or two or three of you to, go up and lobby for this to be, for example, on the 10-year plan, to get DOT to come out and get DES to allow to dredge and fill and to do some things that are really political solutions. So that's something you should consider. Who's going to take the lead? What are you going to do? Should we have a meeting with elected officials at the state level, that sort of thing?
So the only way to fix that water problem is to start in stratum, right?
I think the Director of Public Works believes that if he could dredge out all the vegetation in the riverbed near Exeter Road and down by Lovering Road, that flow would be restored, and that we wouldn't have the backups that we see in wet weather events. But he can't just go into the. Would that it were the old days and we could just send him into the riverbed, right? But we can't do that. Right. So we have to get permission. And the act of getting a dredge and fill permit to do that is Herculean. We have 2 boxfuls of material from a dredge and fill permit back in I think the 90s. It's a huge task, probably more than we have time or money for. But we could convince DOT and DES that it's a problem to infrastructure, in which case it needs to be replaced or something needs to be done, like a culvert needs to be replaced, that kind of thing. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's what you guys decided, was to change the scope of the goal from a dredge and fill to a more political solution. So one of you guys, or 2 of you or 3 of you, have to decide, we're going to go see the commissioner of DES and find out what can be done.
I'll do that.
Excellent. Excellent. So you're talking about the area near, is it Duran?
I believe that's the name, yeah. It's down there on Exeter Road, just as you curve around.
Yeah.
And you know, those poor folks
Right.
get water everywhere. It's not just a threat of infrastructure to the road, which should be of interest to the state,
Right.
but it's the threat of inundation of septic systems and further pollution of the river. You know, if the water keeps rising, they don't have effective septic systems.
Right.
So there's more than one way to come at this.
Gotcha. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Kathy. You hear that, Jim?
Yes, thank you, Kathy.
What I would suggest further is, Kathy, why don't we meet offline and talk about what goals you think, and then we can work out a reporting schedule.
Are we ready for Cynthia?
We are, and I don't mean to steal her thunder, but my recommendation would be you say yes and that you put it on the budget building item.
Welcome, Cynthia.
Glad to be here. Thank you for getting this far in the agenda before 9 p.m. I turn into a pumpkin at 9 p.m., a very damp one. I will simply read the letter that was sent to members of the Select Board with a copy to Mr. Apple, and I believe it's probably in the packet and may actually be online even. July 2nd, on behalf of the members of the Friends of the Northampton Public Library present at our last meeting on June 21st, I am writing to urge the Select Board to fund the printing and mailing to all residents 3 issues, winter, summer, and fall, of the community newsletter. We estimate the annual cost as approximately $12,000, thanks to Lisa's good financial records. As you may know, the community newsletter was a Friends initiative many years ago. It became a collaborative effort of the Friends, Northampton Public Library, Town of Northampton, and Northampton School. I believe at one time the Friends put together the newsletter, and the other entities shared the dollar costs with the money collected by the Friends to pay the bills. The printing and mailing of the newsletter to all residents became sporadic and ended several years ago when most members of those budget committees and select boards evidently bought the myth that everyone has access to an electronic device and would actually use that device to be notified about and read the newsletter. We think that this modest cost-cutting measure has proved penny-wise and pound-foolish, with townspeople less informed about Northampton in general and missing out on activities and events offered by a wide range of organizations as well as town and school news. At present, the library pays the costs through its non-appropriated funds for publishing a PDF version of the newsletter and printing 150 paper copies available at the library and town offices. We request that funding to resume the printing and mail distribution of the community newsletter be considered and approved for the fiscal year 2019 operating budget. Thanking you in advance for your consideration of this request. 2 of my fellow officers are here, Nancy Moynihan and Lisa Peck. Hope Miller couldn't make it tonight, but as I think Kathy can attest, I swear every member of every meeting of the Friends that I've attended, someone has bemoaned the lack of printing and mailing the newsletter.
Well, Paul will tell you, I called him and emailed him many times over the last 3 or 4 years.
And I gave in. Absolutely, I gave in. I found the money, right?
Yeah, at some point, you've got to listen.
Jim, you got any comment?
Susan Grant.
Mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. I would move to support the addition of $12,000 to the whatever budget we need necessary to make sure the community newsletter is sent to Northampton.
I think that was a yes.
I think so, too. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I just want to mention that I did send a copy to the library trustees and to Susan. Susan Grant responded, "Thank you for taking this on. I won't be able to attend the meeting tonight, but you can add my support and let them know that at the library, we often hear people asking about the newsletter and asking why it isn't being mailed out. I think the board would be most impressed by members of the community asking for it to be put back into the budget, since they are the ones who benefit most. I received some very good compliments on the most recent newsletter from several people. They really do appreciate being informed about what is happening in their town." And Susan Leonardi also sent an email. "Thank you and friends for your efforts, Cynthia. I'm always amazed how many people think everyone has access to online information."
Thank you, Cynthia.
And thank you
I think you
all.
got 3 yeses.
Right on.
Mr. Vice Chair,
Sir?
I would move to empower the town administrator to include approximately $12,000 to the fiscal 19 budget for the purpose of funding the printing and mailing of the community newsletter to all residents in Northampton. I say approximately because I assume the cost may vary. So, Paul, would it be more appropriate to say not to exceed?
Yes.
So then I amend that to say not to exceed $12,000.
Kathy?
I'll second the motion.
Kathy seconds your motion. Discussion, I think it's a great idea. We wanted a community newsletter, and by God, we should have one.
It's been a long time coming to get it on the floor here, I'll have to say.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second.
Mr. Majori.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mrs. Kilgore.
Aye.
Done.
We should table the minutes again for June the 12th because I don't see them in the packet. I'll try to figure out what happened.
Okay.
June the 26th.
I read 55 pages of minutes and we're tabling them?
No, just the 12th, not the one that was in your packet.
Sorry, the connection's getting scratchy. Sorry, what?
Jim, we're going to try to finish it before 9 o'clock.
So the corrections to the transcript for June the 26th appear in your packet. With respect to page 2, I think someone mistakenly renamed Kathy Beth, and I think that it should say Kathy instead. Summers, S-O-M-M-E-R-S, not Summers. Dolores, spelled correctly.
Only one.
What?
There's only one M as in Mary and Summers.
Okay. GZA, appropriate punctuation for GZA. The phrase serve as, the phrase I've rambled, and the proper spelling of NATO. None of those are substantive changes. They are ministerial. Other than that, there's no proposed change in the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of June 26th.
I'll second.
So those will be with the ministerial changes, correct?
Yes, sir. Mr. Majori.
Aye.
Mr. Miller.
Aye.
Mrs. Kilgore.
Aye.
Done. Does anybody have anything else you'd like to talk about? Kathy?
Nope.
Jim, anything else?
You gonna open it up
No,
to the
sir, I
public?
just appreciate letting me participate in the conference or Skype or whatever this is.
We're almost there. Let's start our second public comment. Would anybody like to make a comment?
Two questions. You're revising the charge of the Economic Development Committee. Has that been publicized yet as to what could you possibly put the draft out there so that there could be public comment about it?
That's a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And
Where would it be put?
I
where you want to put it?
Not you, I meant him.
What I'll do,
Easy.
I mean, just to help, I mean, it can get confusing trying to find something
Yeah.
on the website.
what I'll do is I'll put a link in Friday folders. It'll probably be on the EDC website, and I'll put a link on Friday folders so you can click and go.
Sounds good.
Second question.
The other is about this, actually, transcription of meetings. I've only seen it in a couple of places. Are transcriptions the actual minutes, or are you going to have minutes? Or are you just going to have transcriptions?
It's a good question.
And if so, are you going to index them?
No, they're not going to be indexed.
Mr. Apple?
Yeah, they're not going to be indexed, and that issue has not yet been resolved.
Yeah, well, you need to resolve it
No,
before you go too far in this. I'm speaking as a records manager. You cannot continue with whatever you said the number of pages were.
Did you, Jim, did you hear what Cynthia said?
I did, yes.
Indexing? You know those little numbers off to the left?
Right, right.
No, it's on the left.
Oh. That went over my head.
Would you like to make a comment, Kathy?
Well, we're trying to get more detailed minutes, and this is the one option that Paul and team has brought to us. I think the original minutes were lacking some sufficient statements that took place during the meetings. It might not be the answer yet. What are our
Well, all I'm
options?
saying is just
Yeah.
figure it out pretty darn quickly before it gets
Well,
totally out of hand in terms of being able to access information in the future from transcriptions. Because, yeah, there's some technological ways now, but it's still a big job. Thank you.
Hi. Cynthia?
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
If these are posted minutes and they become the record the way they are, how is the information not accessible?
Well, something that long,
Yeah,
if you don't index it,
okay. So.
it's
are-
like doing a search of a PDF. Think of how many hits there would be
Okay.
for a certain phrase.
So it's
So
not
if
just
you
the numbers on
have,
the left?
it's just the accumulation of these. I've only seen a couple of places where they've tried that, but then at the end of the year, they index them all, which is a big job for somebody. And at that point, you have to hire an indexer or have somebody on staff who can do it.
Let's ask the service provider if they
Got it.
can. I'll ask the service provider if they can index, because when I was doing depositions in private practice, they started indexing. It was the software would do it for you. So
Okay.
let me find out if that's possible. It might be an additional charge, but we'll find out.
Thank you.
Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little addition to Cynthia's comments. I know this as, not as a records manager, but as a technologist. She's absolutely right. They provide no value unless they're indexed. There's 3 different ways of indexing it. In the piece I believe she's talking about where it costs money and it takes labor is a keyword type of search where you have certain keywords that you search for. Otherwise, you index every word in the document. The problem with searching these unindexed is you have to pull them down onto your PC, then search it. So you need to index them on the server for them to have value. If you want to do a search, like if I wanted to search for the day Larry said purple, green, blue, I would have to pull down every meeting minute and search for it independently. That's the whole thing is indexed. Or you pay somebody to do a keyword index.
So Paul, you'll look into that and see what can be done.
I will.
Jim, any final words of wisdom? You're the guy.
No, I have no words of wisdom, but I have a question for Paul that relates to this. And I made a comment at the last select board meeting that if this is a transcription, that I thought it might be something that would go in the consent calendar because a transcription could not be amended or changed. But after talking with a couple of friends who are attorneys, and then talking with Paul, the thought was, well, what if you're giving a deposition? 5, 10, 3 hours, whatever it is. Paul, is that transcription subject to, and I don't know the proper word, but subject to at least review to make sure that you have the right content in there if it's technical of nature?
Yeah, in a deposition transcript, you're always allowed an errata sheet. I think Mr. Ferraro made the point that in these committees, oftentimes people will want to, in the guise of identifying an error, they go through a process in which they say what I meant to say. It requires the discipline of the board to not permit that. The errors that we described in the transcription are clearly ministerial errors. Instead of I drambled, it's I rambled. That's clearly a ministerial error subject to an errata sheet. So you just, there is no absolute rule that says that a transcript can't be modified. It just, you can't modify it to change the substance of what you said.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Kathy, anything else?
Nope.
Having concluded everything, I can do the adjournment, right?
You can.
This meeting is adjourned. I've never done that before.